माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे हे राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। श्री राधा मदन मोहन ललिता विशाखा देवी की जय। श्री श्री गौरताई की जय। श्री श्री कृष्ण बलराम की जय। जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महारानी की जय। प्रहलाद नरसिंहदेव की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताई गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भागवते उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्नष्ट की। Hey, Hare Krishna. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 19. This chapter is called The Lord Begs Charity from Bali Maharaj. And the texts are 35, 36 and 37. 35 and 36 don't have any purports, so I'll just read. And then 37 we can read together, which has a purport by Srila Prabhupada. So 35, Nishtham te narake manhe haya apradadhu pratishrutam pratishrutasya yonisha pratipadayatam bhavan. This is Shukracharya saying, making his statements to Bali Maharaj. So Shukracharya continues, he says, you will certainly be unable to fulfill your promise. And I think that because of this inability, your eternal residence will be in hell. Text 36. Nataddanam prashasanti yena vrittir vipaddate danam yagyastapha karma loke vritti mato yatha. Learned scholars do not praise that charity which endangers one's livelihood. Charity, sacrifice, austerity, and fruitive activities are possible for one who is competent to earn his livelihood properly. They are not possible for one who cannot maintain himself. Jai Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan Lalita Vishnu Devi ki Jai, Shri Shri Gauranga ki Jai, Krishna Balwani ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Sodharani ki Jai, Prahlad Nrsimhadev Bhagwan ki Jai. So today's text 37. Dharmaya yashashay arthaya kamaya swajanaya cha panchadha vibhajanam vittam iha mutra chamodate. Dharmaya yashashay arthaya kamaya swajanaya cha panchadha vibhajana vittam. Panchadha vibhajan vittam iha mutra chamodate. Dharmaya yashashe arthaya kamaya swajanaya cha panchadha vibhajan vittam iha mutra chamodate. Dharmaya yashashe arthaya kamaya swajanaya cha panchadha vibhajan vittam iha mutra chamodate. Dharmaya yashase arthaya kamaya swajanaya cha panchadha vibhajanan vittam iha mutra chamodate. Dharmaya yashase arthaya kamaya swajanaya cha panchadha vibhajanan vittam chamodate. Matajis? Dharmaya yashase arthaya kamaya cha panchadha vibhajanan vittam chamodate. Dharmaya yashase arthaya kamaya cha panchadha vibhajan vittam Dhyamuttamudate Arathaya Dhyamuttamudate Okay, next word. Dharmaya, for religion. Yashase, for one's reputation. Arthaya, for increasing one's opulence. Kamaya, for increasing sense gratification. Svajanaya cha, and for maintaining one's family members. Panchadha, for these 5 different objectives. Vibhajan, dividing. Vittam, his accumulated wealth. Iha, in this world. Amutra, the next world. Cha, and Modate, he enjoys. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jaya. Translation: Therefore, one who is in full knowledge should divide his accumulated wealth in 5 parts: for religion, for reputation, for opulence, for sense gratification, and for the maintenance of his family members. Such a person is happy in this world and in the next. Please repeat after me. Therefore, one who is in full knowledge should divide his accumulated wealth in 5 parts: for a religion, for a reputation, for opulence, for sense gratification, and for the maintenance of his family members. Such a person is happy in this world and in the next. Purport: The Shastras enjoin that if one has money, one should divide all that he has accumulated into 5 divisions: 1 part for religion, 1 part for reputation, 1 part for opulence, 1 part for sense gratification, and 1 part to maintain the members of his family. At the present, however, because people are bereft of all knowledge, they spend all the money for the satisfaction of the family. Srila Rupa Goswami taught us by his own example by using 50% of his accumulated wealth for Krishna, 25% for his own self, and 25% for the members of his family. One's main purpose should be to advance in Krishna consciousness. This will include dharma, artha, and kam. However, because one's family members expect some profit, one should also satisfy them by giving them a portion of one's accumulated wealth. This is a shastric injunction. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manavabhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayham Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guruho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhishcha Kripa Sindhubhe Evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Charu Swami Nityananda Snigdha Cheta Suparaneta Vagavanam Chasankam Prabhupada Gatram Nomi Bhakti Charu Guru Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurani Pachari Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Ashit Jaitam Surator Pango Mama Manda Matergati Mat Sarvasva Padam Bhojo Shri Radha Madan Mohano. So Dharmaya Yashase Arthaya Kamaya Sojanaya Cha Panchadha Vivajan Vittam Iha Mutra Chamudate. Therefore one who is in full knowledge should divide his accumulated wealth in 5 parts, for religion, for reputation, for opulence, for sense gratification, and for the maintenance of his family members. Such a person is happy in this world and in the next. So, in this chapter, we are almost towards the end, where Lord Vamandev is begging charity from the emperor of the world, Bali Maharaj, who had conquered the whole universe. He had subdued the great devatas, the demigods, great personalities, and he conquered the heavenly planets and subjugated everyone under his rule. And then Lord Vishnu incarnated as Vamandev to beg charity. And Prabhupada points out in purports of previous verses that by begging, Lord Vamandev is indicating, I think text 17, is indicating to Bali Maharaj that you got more than what you need. You got more than what you need. And in the purport of that text 17, where, let me just read that. It's very interesting. I'll just, if you don't mind, I'll just summarize this chapter. It'll help me also in basically discussing this particular verse. But in text 17, where Vamandev is telling Bali Maharaj, because when Bali Maharaj heard from this young Brahmin, so attractive young Brahmin, in the form of Vamandev, Bali Maharaj actually called him that you're not very intelligent, because you're only asking for 3 steps of land, where I can give you unlimited opulences. I can give you one of the many planets in the universe, one of the 9 dweepas, as Bali Maharaj says, one of the 7 dweepas in 9 verses. So he called Vamandev, you're not very intelligent. You're asking for charity, but you don't know what to ask for. And this also happens, we see, we hear so many stories. Sometimes a person asks for charity from a person who's so opulent, who can give them so much, and yet they only ask very small amount. And this happens, the same thing is happening with Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj is thinking that Vamandev, the transcendental beggar, doesn't know who Bali Maharaj is. But it's the opposite. Normally, when a beggar asks a donor, the beggar doesn't know who the donor actually is. It's just like if I don't know who Mukesh Ambani is, and I go and asking for a 1,000 rupee donation, and I don't know who that is, and the person will think, he doesn't know. He came to me and he's insulting me, just asking me 1,000 rupees. If he had asked me 1 crore rupee, then would have been okay. If he asked me 10 crore, then it would have been better. If he asked me 50 crore, that's appropriate. See? The beggar doesn't know the opulence of the donor, but here the beggar does know. In fact, the donor doesn't know the opulence of the beggar. Here, it's reverse. And so, when Vamandev is hearing this, we can. I mean, I don't know what the acharyas say on this particular. We can imagine what Vamandev may have been thinking when Bali Maharaj is telling him, "You're not intelligent. You're not asking me for what I'm really worth." So Bali Maharaj, in one sense, saying, "You're insulting me. You're just asking me only for 3 pieces of land, where I can give you so much." So there are qualifications of a beggar, and there's a qualifications of a donor as well. Otherwise, it's very easy if the donor is intelligent. This day and age, donor although has the capacity, but they don't want to part away with their hard-earned wealth. In fact, one of the most important things to give away, or one of the things one is most attached to in this world, is wealth, is money. One can, I'm talking relatively here. Other possessions one may have in the form of friends, society, even family, especially in this day and age of Kali. Wealth is most right at the top. Wealth actually comes on the top in terms of the attraction and attachment. And if one loses one friend, even one's family, there's so many cases in the news. The most number of criminal offenses are carried out in the name of property, wealth. And with who? Family members, not with your friends. And what happens? There are cases you murder your family members, you murder your relatives just for wealth. So if one loses one's family members, society, friend, it's a loss. But the greatest loss is encountered when loses one's money. Even if one loses 10 rupee, somebody nicks and steals 10 rupee or falls out of your pocket, it really hurts. Really hurts. Can you imagine if one loses money more than that? If somebody steals the hard-earned money, the most attachment in this world is Kanchan, Kamani and Kirti. So Kanchan is right at the top. So with Kanchan, you can do everything. In today's world, sense gratification, enjoyment is based on money. That's why if you lose money, you lose in one sense everything. That greatest attachment, greatest loss one feels because of money. Whereas the opposite is there on the path of Krishna consciousness. We'll learn there's two aspects, two major aspects. There are many aspects, but two major aspects on the path of devotional service for a sadhaka is not to be attached to Kanchan and Kamini, wealth and women. But it's diametrically opposite to the modern world we live in. That's why it's so hard to practice devotional service, because of that attachment. Even though there are attachments in two levels, as we know, gross level and subtle level. One can, by the practice of devotional service, with association, one can relatively easy overcome the gross attachment. But it takes longer and more effort and more association, more self-determination to overcome the subtle attachments. Name, fame, adoration, like that, which are worse than the gross attachment. So here, So in one sense, Bali Maharaj is kind of feeling a bit insulted, and he's telling Vamandev, "Look, you don't know. You're a little boy. You don't know what to ask." But then Vamandev replies. He says, "Oh, he only needs 3 steps of land. And these verses, in fact, the whole chapter is based on the theme of charity. And we know charity is described in 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, charity in mode of passion, goodness and ignorance. And Danam is 18th chapter, text 5 also. Lord Krishna says, Yagya Danam Tapaschaiva Pavanani Manishanam. So even these three aspects, Yagya, Dan and Tapasya, purifies the great souls, Manishanam. Even it purifies them. So this charity, one should never give up. The performance of Yagya, one should never give up. Yagya, in the case of ISKCON, means Sankirtan Yagya. And Tapasya has various connotations, but Prabhupada has very much simplified the Tapasya, which is attending the morning program, following 4 regulative principles, reading, chanting, like that, doing service 6 hours at least a day. I think the GBC is 8 hours, I'm not sure, 6 to 8 hours daily physical service. So that is a tapasya. I know, especially in the winter here is mild compared to winter in Vrindavan. Getting up in the morning in Vrindavan is very difficult. That is real tapasya. But you find probably the greatest tapasvis in Vrindavan. Jai Shri Radha Madan Mohan Lalita Vishakha Devi ki, Go Nitai ki jai, Krishna Balram ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Prahlad Narasimhadev ki jai. So, and so much points to make. So, I came up with 4 main points. There's many sub-points. I won't touch on that because the time is short. But the first point is needing what is required. As Bali Maharaj tells Vamandev, you only ask for 3 pieces, 3 steps of land. I can give you more. And then Vamandev replies, a learned Brahman takes charity from others only according to his needs. He does not become, otherwise he becomes entangled in sinful activities. So, what is our need and how much one requires? And Prabhupada points it out, this particularly, although it applies to everyone, but particularly applies more to brahmacharis and sannyasis. There is a little provision for the grihasthas to accumulate. Otherwise, how can they get 50% of the accumulated wealth? So therefore, that provision is there for the grihasthas, but not for the brahmacharis and the sannyasis. They are in one sense a much more advantageous position, and one who in the path of devotional service, irrespective of the varana ashram, one has to be careful that we don't need, or we don't take on and hoard and keep more than what we need. As Ishopanishad mantra says, Ishamasya idam sarvam yatkinchita jigatayana jagat. So, tena tyaktena bhunjita ma kasya ma kridha kasya swadhanam. So one has to, how does one know what is one's quota? How does one know one's needs are? That's a practical aspect. We can maybe discuss that later on. What is the practicality? Yes, it's reading, having a knowledge, but turning into realized knowledge. Turning Gyan into Vigyan is the key in devotional service, in progression. Gyan Vigyan Triptatma, as in 6th chapter, Lord Krishna is pointing out. This Tript Atma, this satisfaction, will only come when Gyan turns into Vigyan. If the Gyan stays at Gyan level, then we make progress. To come to the level of Gyan is, especially in path of devotional service, is very high position. But even better or even more progressive stages, turning to Vigyan. So how to apply this particular aspect of I only accept what I need in practicality. That is the key. Hopefully we will discuss that later on. The other point I wanted to discuss before turning into the for the perfect um, is we know that Bali Maharaj rejects his guru. You see. Here, Guru Shukracharya gave him an instruction, and we know that Guru Ravagya is, out of the 10 offenses, the most serious offense. Yet we find there are certain examples in the scriptures where a disciple, a shishya, has rejected the advice and order of his guru, and this is one of them. Where Bali Maharaj, he pondered, he contemplated on his Guru Shukracharya's advice, but he went against that. Again, we can discuss this point in a minute. And the other example we know, Bhishma Dev, he rejected Harshuran's advice. I think there are a few other examples. Anyone remember? Yes, they rejected Lord Brahma's advice. Yeah, there are many examples. So there are 2 or 3 areas, but the underlying principle of rejection, as Mahabharata Bhishma Dev also points out to Yudhishthira Maharaj, if the Guru is going off track, if has started going off track means becoming adharmic, has become sinful, not following the principles of religion, so that individual can be, after due consideration, not whimsically, that individual can be rejected. But here we find the example is Shukracharya gave an advice to Bali Maharaj against the principles of religion. Although Shukracharya, we find in this text 37, is giving reasons, and later on towards the end of this chapter, he says the learned individuals, the scriptures say that one can reject, go against one's promise. And in fact, we find right at the beginning, Prabhupada, when summarizing at the beginning of this chapter, Vaman Dev is praising the family of Bali Maharaj's previous, his father Virochan, his grandfather Prahlad Maharaj, and Vaman Dev even praised Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. So the whole family is praised, and Vaman Dev tells Bali Maharaj, I hope you don't go back on your promise. He hasn't made the promise yet, but he's foretelling of the situation, what will happen, because he's coming from such a great family. And he tells, Vamandev tells Bali Maharaj, you have a wonderful person as the advisor. Who's that? Prahlad Maharaj, his grandfather, whose advises and whose Prahlad Maharaj was attached to his grandson, and vice versa. So, and then opposite to Vamandev, Shukracharya is giving advice. That's why Bali Maharaj actually rejected Shukracharya. Anyway, let's see if we come back to that. The other point I wanted to give is talk about is surrendering, because here one of the 9 processes, one is Atmanivedanam, and Bali Maharaj actually signifies that, exemplifies that, and surrender. How to surrender? There are different forms of surrender. Ye yathamam prapadante tamsteva bhajamayam. According to one's surrender, one's progress is made. And how one surrenders, how much one should surrender, when to surrender, how to surrender, why one should surrender, who to surrender. These are many aspects of surrendering. And ultimate surrender, as we know, the 6 symptoms we read. But we don't have time to go into that either. But as a principle, unless we surrender fully, or even if one surrenders fully, one may not achieve one's result also, if our motive is not right. So our motive has to be right, as well as surrender. So one can surrender fully, but if the motive is not right, the surrendering process will not take us to our goal. That's another point I wanted to discuss. And the other point was charity. I mentioned earlier, charity should be given to the right person voluntarily, at the appropriate time and place, as chapter 17 points out. But ultimate charity is, there are different types of charity, we know. And modern, Prabhupada points out later on the purports, that modern civilization concentrates on giving charity to the poor. But Shukracharya is discouraging Bali Maharaj not to give to the poor, to this poor Brahmin. In fact, one can lie when you give to the poor, that I don't have enough. All I had I've given to you. And we find, so Shukracharya is saying that is okay. One can do that. However, Prabhupada in the purport points out about those poor beggars, because Prabhupada says, very strong words here, he says, beggars always present themselves as posing, as possessing nothing. And this may be very good for them. We find the beggars, they come on the streets, I have nothing. Even if you give them something, few minutes later they will come back to you saying, I have nothing. Because they encounter so many individuals, but they don't recognize the donor. Okay, but Prabhupada says, always drawing the attention and compassion of others. But this is also condemned. This form of charity is condemned. If one purposefully continues this professional begging, he is supposed to be dead while breathing. Or according to another interpretation, such a man of falsity should be killed while still breathing. So it's false. So that individual is actually deceiving you. And Prabhupada quotes the Vedic injunction in this regard as follows. If one continuously poses himself as possessing nothing and collects money by begging, he should be killed. That's a Vedic injunction. I'm not saying we should do that, but that's a Vedic injunction. Otherwise, we'll have to kill practically all the beggars in this world. But that is a separate issue. But just quickly touch the purport in terms of charity, because the main theme of this chapter is charity. And this text is talking about 5 divisions of charity. One for religion, that's very obvious if one is a religious person or a cultured person, because of the 4 Purusharthas, Dharma, Arth, Kam and Moksha. And for a Vaishnava, the 5th Purushartha is Bhakti. So everything is based on first goal of life, Purushartha, which is Dharma. And the whole Dharma, Earth is based on Dharma, Kam is based on Dharma, and Moksha is based on Dharma. So the underlying principle, the basis of one's existence is Dharma. It's religions. So therefore, one's hard-earned money should go to propagation of Dharma. Dharma rakshati rakshita. Those who protect the Dharma, Dharma in turn reciprocates and protects that individual. Not physically, but in terms of, maybe physically also, but in terms of one's spiritual side, spiritual aspect. So protection of Dharma is very important, and propagation of Dharma is extremely important. And then we have for reputation, the second aspect. People spend millions, big companies spend millions to protect one's reputation. So, for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than the death, Krishna points out in chapter 2. So the dishonor or reputation is extremely important. To protect that, 20% is, according to scriptures, is described one should um, spend on that. Third is opulence, living it up, as they say in English. Having opulent life, extravagant life, show off, showing other people. Just that's 20% for that, and then 20% for sense gratification. So, what is the difference between opulence and sense gratification? There is a difference. One is just the showing, and after opulence comes sense gratification. You spend money to have a huge house, that's opulence, but then to enjoy that house, that's sense gratification. And then finally, the maintenance of his family members. But then Rupa Goswami Prabhupada points out, Rupa Goswami summarized these 5 divisions into 3. What are those 3? 50% of wealth to spiritual causes for Krishna, wealth for Krishna, 25% to keep for oneself, and 25% for family members. And this is the Vedic injunctions. In fact, practically all the religions in the world, they have their guidelines in terms of how much donation they should give to others. I think it hovers around 10%, 10 to 15 to 20%. But here, 50%. 50% of what? Is it 50% of income? No, it's 50% of the profit of accumulated wealth. Accumulation of wealth comes after all the expenditure. It's basically not that I'm earning whatever I earn, I give 50% for charity to Krishna. No, it's not like that. And this is a Shastric injunction. Now, I just wanted to come back to in terms of other points I made, in terms of one's needs. I think this is very important. All of us, unless we are satisfied what we have, there was a very famous American billionaire, John Paul Getty, I think his name was, and his motto was, his main point of life, and his motto was just one word: more. M-O-R-E, more. I want more, 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 more. That was his life. He based his life around on this word, and he became a billionaire. But was that his real need? So similarly, in our practice of Krishna consciousness, we all have to, whether brahmachari, grihastha, or whoever one is, any person on the path of devotional service, we must all the time should think what our needs are, and how much time we're spending in accumulating our needs. How much time we're spending? It's because there are 2 types of needs. One is one's physical needs, and obviously it's mental need as well. But the real need is the need of the soul, or the spiritual need. How much time we're spending accumulating for our spiritual benefit, welfare, for this life and in the future. And that should be the real need of one's existence. And our life should be based on, in that aspect of needing something. We all need something. So physically, mentally, wealth-wise, etc. But the spiritual aspect should be paramount, and one should work towards that by hook or crook. And that's why association, knowledge, environment is very important. But most important, and the basis of that is knowledge. Unless we have the right type of knowledge and right type of understanding, then we will have our life based on that appropriately. And we are so lucky that Prabhupada has given us the right direction, right knowledge, and right type of lifestyle to make sure our spiritual needs are taken care of. Having a balance, especially those who stay in the ashrams, the temples, there isn't, Prabhupada made a very little provision for to go astray from the spiritual path. There are more chances, those who don't stay in the ashram, in the temple, of them being attracted or lured away, and that happens. So that's why having a sound understanding of the philosophy, conviction, where that Shraddha is turned into Nishtha, that is very important. So when the Shraddha turns into Nishtha, the knowledge, Gyan becomes Vigyan. And that when it becomes Vigyan, it is that platform, that Nishtha platform, wherever one is, whoever one is fixed in one's endeavor, and progress becomes very easy. So everything depends on needs, and needs are there depending on our desires. Our desires depend on the state of mind. That's there the mental needs should be taken care of. If the mental need is not taken care of, no, all other needs are not taken care of. So the prime need, in one sense, the basis of spiritual need, is in satisfaction of the mind. And satisfaction of the mind, Krishna talks about that, Lord Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita throughout, and Prabhupada gives wonderful explanations how, in his purports, how to satisfy the mind. And we know, we all practice all the time, Manhatarayate iti mantra. So we all practice the Hare Krishna mantra, association. But even Prabhupada says there are accidents on royal roads. This is where we have to be careful of. The other point I just wanted to quickly mention is charity. Charity, ultimate charity, so many types of charity. From a karma kandi point of view, or from a religious point of view, or a cultural point of view. One of the top charities is in a marriage, Kanyadan is regarded very high type of charity. Other types of charity we know, opening hospitals, helping the poor, etc., etc., etc. But for a person in Krishna consciousness, the best charity one can receive and the best charity one can give is a charity of spiritual knowledge. Charity of how to progress in Krishna consciousness. And that's why yesterday was Gita Jayanti, and this month is the book marathon. It is very imperative, it's very important that throughout the year, but especially this month, we all take part in this greatest charity in ISKCON, which is giving out Krishna to everyone. And how does one give out Krishna? Through the books of Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's books elucidate, explain very clearly, very simply, how to obtain Krishna, how to progress on the path of devotional service, and how to become the greatest donor in the world. How to become the greatest donor in giving this wonderful charity. And this one should never forget. And the other point, quickly, is one should never lose the power of discrimination, and one should never stop utilizing one's intelligence. If one doesn't use our vivek or our buddhi, and then one can easily be swayed away. If Bali Maharaj never used his power, discrimination, or his intelligence, he would not become an acharya in Atmanivedanam. He would have listened to his guru, Shukracharya, who was advising against doing service to Lord Vishnu. How does one stop that? Prabhupada said, in ISKCON, who's needed? Independently thoughtful men is needed. That means one should never lose one's power of discrimination and intelligence. If one uses this power, one can render service even better. Rather than just without without or otherwise. And that's another important lesson we learn, that we must know what is right, what is wrong all the time. Yes, surrendering is there, but surrendering does not mean that one becomes unintelligent. It doesn't mean that. Surrendering means only intelligent can surrender to the Lord, to the Guru, or to the process of devotional service, or to the process of Krishna consciousness. But to continue in the path of process of Krishna consciousness, the use of intelligence is required even more. Sorry, I just I'll give some bullet points. Don't have time to discuss in great details. But if somebody has any, I'll stop here. If anyone has any corrections, comments or questions, or some discussion points we can have, because it's a very deep chapter. So much to learn from this particular incident. And Prahlad Maharaj and his family, they're especially favored by the Lord. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu listened to the Leelas of Prahlad Maharaj. So they are extremely, although they're born in the Asuric family, but they are the greatest devotees of the Lord. And that's another aspect we have to learn. We should not take everyone from face value. Their birth, the environment, the circumstances in their born is irrelevant on the path of devotional service. Ramananda Swami. He said, we all know very famous verse, Jat Paat Puchat Nahi Koi, Jo Hari Ko Bhaje, so Hari Ka Hoi. So this discrimination aspect, and this is another very important aspect, this discrimination on the path of Krishna consciousness still happens a lot. And one should not discriminate. That's another fifth point I wanted to discuss in great detail, but we won't. But somebody has any? Yes.
Hare Krishna. In Swaminarayan, we see that they have made a policy of 10% donation, and like they are able to successfully collect 10% from many of their grastas. But here we have the understanding of 50%, and we are not even able to collect 3%, because that doesn't give fulfillment. Even while I was working, I was donating 10% with a very without having fulfillment, because I know that I am expected to give 50. So in that way, here also this is like money is divided in 5 parts. That means 20% to religion. So if like the GBC comes with a policy of 20%, people will have at least satisfaction of following.
Actually, there's two aspects. This 50%, my understanding, or because there's accumulated wealth. So, and Rupa Goswami and the Sanatan Goswami, when they left Mayapur, or left the Nawab Hussain Shah's jurisdiction, so one point of consideration is they did it towards the end of their material life, not during their life. How much they donated during the life, there's other aspect. So this 50%, my understanding, specifically points out to the accumulated wealth at the end of one's life. But see, this is where the misunderstanding may be, false understanding may be. One thinks, oh, okay, I will give 50% when I go old, and now I don't do anything. This is not the proper understanding. See, now till that time comes when one donates 50% of the accumulated wealth, that charity should not stop. That should not stop. That should be given continued. Okay, maybe not 50%, maybe 10%, or 5%, or 20%. The regular donation charity has to be there. Whether it's been mandated, I don't know. Whether it should be mandated, I don't know. But it should be encouraged, definitely. everyone should be encouraged to give something regularly. Because giving, as said, giving money is one practice is detachment. Otherwise, detachment doesn't come mentally. Detachment doesn't come giving your clothes away. It does, but the greatest detachment comes when you give your money to somebody. So yeah, I mean, we should be encouraged, no doubt, because this false sense of it's an excuse. We don't. Oh, I'll give 50% later on. So that doesn't help. Okay, is there anything else? Okay, yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Practically, I see many times that my nearest relatives or my friends, they cannot do donation for Krishna consciousness or other purpose. But if I tell them I need some money, but they are ready to give me. If I tell me I need money, that money, if I use Krishna consciousness, that is cheating or right?
I don't fully understand. Personal.
This is cheating or right?
Oh, okay, when you ask for personally, they give, but they don't give for Krishna consciousness. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if they don't give directly to the temple, they give to you personally. So you utilize that for Krishna's. So they will get benefit. You utilize some and give most to to the temple. Whatever you need is you take, and then give rest to the temple. So they will get benefit. Yes. See, there may be many reasons why one may not want to give to the temple. Because ultimately, I'm not saying, I'm just talking generally here, not any specific temple or any religious organization in the world. We find that not everyone, but some individual have lost their trust and faith in the organization, on religion. I mean, there's so many scandals, so many scams everywhere. The greatest cheaters are in the name of religion in the world. So people get put off. So they don't. I know many wealthy individuals. They don't want to give to religion, but they want to give to philanthropic work like education, other aspects. Because whatever the reason may be, but one is they lost. Some of them had a uh, bad experience with an organization. So whatever the reason may be. But if somebody doesn't want to give directly to the organization, but gives a person who's working in the organization, so that person can utilize it for the organization. So both three will benefit: you, the donor, and the organization. Okay, Prabhu. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Puran ki jai. Tagore Premanandi. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Ram Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Sadhu, Lal Kitab. Hare Ram, Hare Ram.
Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Hare Krishna Hare Ram Shri Krishna Chaitanya Jaya Karmo Shri Krishna Chaitanya कर्मोरे तुम बिन के दयाल जगत संसार तुम बिन के दयाल जगत संसार तुम बिन के दयालु जगत संसार तुम बिन के दयालु जगत संसार श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु दया करो तुम बिन के दयालु जगत संसारे तुम बिन के दयालु जगत संसार श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु दया करो मोरे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य दया करो तुम बिन के दयालु जगत संसारे तुम बिन के दयालु जगत संसारे तुम बिना के दयालु जगत संसार पतित पावन पतित पावन पतित पावन तव अवतार नव अवतार मौसम पतित प्रभु अपाई मौसम पतित प्रभु अपाई तेदर हाँ प्रभु नित्यानंद प्रभु नित्यानंद प्रभु नित्यानंद प्रेमानंद सुखी प्रभु नित्यानंद प्रभु नित्यानंद प्रेमानंद सुखी कृपालोकन करो विवर दुखी कृपालोकन करो विवर कृपालोकन Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Karo More Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Shuddha Bhakta Charanare Bhajana Ankula Shuddha Bhakta Charanare Bhajana Pula Shuddha Bhakta Charanare Bhajana Pula Charanare Madana Kona Bhagata Seva Paramasi Bhagata Seva Paramasi Premalati Karamo Sada Bhakta Charanare Bhajana Kula Shodamata Charanare Bhajana Kula Bhagata Deva Paramasi Bhagata Deva Paramasi Premalati Karamo Madhavati Bhagati Yatane Palana Kari Madhavati Bhagati Jana Yatane Palana Kari Madhavati Bhagati Janani Yatane Palana Kari Krishna Vasati Vasati Paramahari Madhavaditi Bhagati Nipalari Krishna Vasati Vasati Paramahari Shuddha Bhakta Charanare Madhavadi Bhagati Janani Madhavadi Bhagati Jana Yadane Paranaga Krishna Vadari Vasari Paramadariva Krishna Vadari Vasari Paramadariva Gauru Maharaj Savadane Gauru Maharaj Savadane Brahma Vedavithana Hari Bhagata Sange Gauru Maharaj Sange Vedavithana Hari Bhagata Sange Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Mridangavada Sunitama Avasara Sadaya Mridangavada Yaji Gauravi Kirtanasa Ananda Hridaya Nati Mridangava Sunite Mridangavada Avasarata Yanti Gauravita Kirtana Param Prasada Seva Karite Sakala Prapancha Jan Prasada Seva Karite Sakala Prapancha Jan Jai Din Grahe Bhajana Dekhi Jai Din Grahe Bhajana Dekhi Radhe Guru Kumar Charana Sidhu Dekhiya Charana Sidhu Dekhiya Apana Sima Paya Charana Sidhu Dekhiya Apana Sima Paya Tulasi Judaye Prana Madhavato Jani Tulasi Dekhi Judaye Prana Madhavato Jani Gauramiyada Devanasa Kamani Gaura Priya Sakasya Devanasa Kamani Bhagati Vinoda Krishna Bhajane Bhagati Vinoda Krishna Bhajane Anugul Paye Jaan Prati Divase Param Srikar Kare Tam Prati Divase Param Prati Divase Param Pratidivase Paramaha Pratidivase Paramaha Srikara Kare Tayo Nama Charanare Ajanan Gora Varadare Demalatika Ramona Madhavadi Devani Janani Yadare Malanagari Rama Range Pranay Bhagata Sange Mridangava Punitima Avasara Sadayani Gauravi Etanatu Anandaya Radhe Yogana Morade Deki Amor Paramananda Prasada Deva Garitaya Sakala Prapancha Jani Jedinagra Radhe Golakavajarana Degiyaga Sakanani Tulasi Dehi Judare Madhava Doshini Jani